How's it, chaps? In today's video, we are looking at how to change your valve cover gasket. Also known as a rocket cover or a tappet cover, they're basically all the same thing. And it is quite a simple job. It's something that you guys can do at home in your garage with basic tools. Simply put, we're just going to remove anything that is above the valve cover. And in my case, there was a bit of wiring and an air intake that I had to remove. Then we're going to pull that cover off, drop in a new gasket, and that's pretty much it. Also, if you are interested, there are a couple of other maintenance related videos. So how to change clutches, the oils around your vehicle, shocks, and there's a whole lot of other random stuff. So be sure to check those out. Well, welcome back to the Burton Builds garage. Let's get started. So how do we know when it's time to be replaced? Well, if it's leaking oil, it's probably time to be replaced. And it's either going to be due to loose bolts or a bad gasket, generally always a bad gasket. And think about it this way, inside your engine bay, all of those parts are usually subject to a lot of heat cycles, a lot of vibration, and then these rubber seals are eventually going to go hard. Even if it's a RTV seal, it might let go, and then things start leaking. In some cases, rubber seals can even break and snap, and then there's going to be a leak. The specific vehicle we're working on today is a Toyota Hilux 2.7 VVTi 2x4, and it's a 2006 model pickup. Although anything that we're doing here today, you can probably apply the same methods and procedures and carry those over to whatever vehicle you're working on. Just remember to check with your service agent or consult your maintenance manual for any specific procedures that you guys might have to follow for your specific vehicle. Also, give the video a thumbs up if you want to see more of this type of content and if you like the video. If you didn't like the video, don't just give it a thumbs down. Why don't you let us know in the comment section what you don't like? And it's always nice to hear from you guys. So what tools do we need for today's job? You may need a few different sockets, and in my case, I only needed a number 10, a flathead screwdriver, a pair of pliers, and a torque wrench or torque adapter. And that's pretty much it as far as tools go. What consumables are we going to need for today's job? Well, simply put, we need a couple of rags, a soft wire brush, a scouring pad or a scraper, and that's generally to clean up a bit of the oil, some brake clean or benzene, and that is to remove any oil from where you're going to be putting any RTV sealer on, a little bit of wire or string, of course some RTV sealer, some masking tape and a Sharpie, and maybe some penetrating oil, and that's mainly for your stubborn bolts. We're also going to need a replacement gasket around the outer edge of the cover, and in my case, there was another gasket set that was needed for where the spark plug holes are. So I just went down to our local dealer and picked up some OEM Toyota gaskets, and these, funny enough, were not that much more expensive than just going down to the local parts stores and buying aftermarket parts. So don't always think that aftermarket parts are going to be cheaper. Okay, let's get started. We need to remove everything on top of the valve cover. So we start off by unplugging the airflow sensor and unclipping the wiring from the two clips holding it onto the air cleaner pipe. Be careful with the airflow sensor, as these things are pretty sensitive, which is why I chose to unplug it rather than just taking two bolts out and removing it from the pipe. We also need to disconnect any vacuum hoses and crankcase breathers. If your car has multiple hoses, maybe just stick some tape on each of them, mark them up so that you know exactly where they go back. Next up is to remove the air intake pipe and cleaner cover. To do this, we remove all of the bolts, brackets and clamps holding it to the engine. Once that's done, the filler lid can be unclipped and the whole lot removed. I'm lifting everything off pretty gently so that I don't snag anything by mistake. Now, there was also one clip that was a bit easier to release from underneath the bracket, so that is exactly what I'm doing now. Great stuff. Next up, we need to unplug each of the coil packs. Be careful with these plugs, as you don't want to damage any of the wiring or, worse, any of the coils when you're unplugging them. So I had to use a small flat screwdriver on the last coil just to make it a little bit easier to unclip. I also stuck a clean rag into the intake. We don't really want anything going in here. My valve cover also had a breather behind the engine, kind of hidden away, so that also had to be removed. Next up was to unclip and pull all of the wiring clear of the valve cover. Try to release each clip without breaking it and work your way around slowly. A small flat screwdriver worked well for me here again. Now guys, take your time, work slowly and carefully, a little bit at a time. Unless you're meeting your mates for beers at 6, then by all means flip and rip that shit off. But that's on you. Once all the wiring was loose, I needed a way of holding it back from the cover. So I quickly ran outside, cut some wire off the fence, and that worked awesome. Now, you guys don't have to worry if your neighbors don't have a wire fence, just use some string. Before removing the coil packs, it's good practice to blow off the area clear of any dust and loose debris. This is so that nothing falls down the spark plug holes when we remove the coils. Now we can remove all the coil packs, and guys, be careful with these things. You don't want to be throwing them around. I also put them on the bench in order so that I know exactly where they go back once I'm completing the job. Now here is a top tip. If your car doesn't have coil packs, it's probably got lightning wires. And if these are all the same length, they can pretty much get mixed up. So you don't really want this to happen, and then the firing order is all wrong, and you have 5 reverse gears and 1 forward gear. Nah, it's just not lacquer. So break out the tape and the marker again, and just mark them accordingly. Now that the valve cover is completely free, we can remove all the bolts around the edges, 13 in total. My cover also had 6 bolts on top, so I cracked each of these loose before removing them completely. You also might want to keep your bolts in order, and that's if they are different lengths or sizes. Luckily, I only had 2 different types, so I just set them aside in 2 piles on the bench. Another top tip, if you can, put a mirror up on the other side of the car, that way you can remove the bolts on both sides at the same time. Now, you may need to give the cover a little bit of a bump to get it unstuck, but in my case the cover lifted right off. Also remember to throw a clean rag over the valve train while you are cleaning up and installing the new gasket on the cover. We can see that the old gasket is well past its sell-by date. It's so hard I'm having to crack it off with a screwdriver. It doesn't even come off in one piece, and it's supposed to come off in one piece. So removing the outer gasket was a bit easier, just prying it loose from the groove and easing it out all the way around. Perfect. Now we can just clean out the groove with a rag. Now, the right thing to do here is to take the new gasket out of the bag, let it relax, stretch out, watch a bit of TV, take shape, you know, that type of thing. And that's while you're removing and cleaning up the old one. So, of course, I went straight from bag to cover, but before I did that, I compared the old gasket to the new one. And we can clearly see that the new ones are nice and soft and rubbery. And that's mostly because they are actually rubber. So, out with the old and in with the new. This was just a matter of aligning and pressing each gasket into place. If your cover uses a flat gasket or one that needs to be sealed with an RTV sealer, you're going to have to clean the surfaces. To do this, I've found a soft wire brush or the scouring side of one of those kitchen sponge things makes for a pretty nice cleaning tool. And that's to remove some stubborn bits of old RTV if your cover was stuck on with that. It also cleans up the oil stains pretty nicely. Just be careful you don't gouge or mar any of the sealing surfaces. So, if we look closely over here at this area, and over here at this area, there is a small bit of sealer across the front of the head and the timing cover. So after cleaning the top surface, we'll need to reapply some fresh sealer at these 2 points. Cleaning the top surface is fairly simple. We just wipe off all the excess oil with an old rag, and then I used a clean rag and a bit of benzene to remove any of the oil that was left behind. You guys can use brake clean or any type of rubbing alcohol. You definitely want to clean the surface of any oil if you are using an RTV sealer here. In my case, my gasket was a rubber gasket and it just goes straight on, just like that, no sealer required. Again, take your time putting the cover on. We don't want to snag or damage the new gasket. Once that's done, all we got to do is tighten up those loose bolts again. Now guys, the correct thing to do here is to go to your maintenance manual, check out the correct torque spec and tightening pattern for your bolts. So I just tightened mine using the older finger meter until the knuckles clicked method, and that worked just fine. My cover also has steel inserts, so when we tighten the bolts, the gasket will only squash until the steel inserts are tight. You'll also notice though that I did tighten all of my bolts in a crisscross pattern, doing each one a little bit at a time, and this is good practice. And guys, that is the hard part done. All that's left to do is put all the coil packs back in, plug in all the wiring, throw on the air intake pipe and the filter cover, and bolt, tighten and clip the whole lot back into place. And also don't forget to plug in the vacuum tubes and the breather pipes. And guys, that's it. All that's left to do is to start the engine and check for any leaks. What you can also do is take the vehicle for a test drive down to your local Krispy Kremes, do some donuts, and once you are back, check for any leaks once again. If there's no leaks, good job. Also, you may need to consult your service manual. The manual may require you to check that the bolts are still tight after a couple of 100 miles. Generally, that's probably a good thing to do anyway. Guys, for the video, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. It's always nice to hear from you. And I guess we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.